From architecture to painting and sculpture, literature to live music and theater. Radio 111 presents Bonnie G. and Brayan Mendoza with The Desert Scene, your connection to culture and entertainment in the desert cities. Here's Bonnie and Brayan.
Welcome to The Desert Scene. Okay, we're having a little technical difficulty here. All right, we're here. Hey, Brayan, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I just realized that I know why the audio is really low because I accidentally put it up.
Oh, okay.
Put it up. Oh, Lord have mercy.
All right, so we're in fall. It's beautiful. I'm so glad it's cool out. Yay! It's actually in the morning. You got to put on a sweater, which is great. I was tired of hot weather. Tired.
Oh Lord. I mean, I was actually for once enjoying the fact that like when I go outside, I was like, finally I get to actually enjoy some of this cold weather, and it doesn't have to just be 5 a.m. like when I have to commute. It's not just that. It's just so nice to be able to go outside and not feel like I'm burning all the time.
And sleep with the windows open and all the good stuff. Yes. It's fabulous.
And I love the fact that my AC actually feels really cold to the point that I have to turn it off. I love it.
Now, did you get your car straightened out? I know you had car issues for a while.
No, I did. I got that straightened out. I mean, what it turned out was just like a hose. Like I need to fix it or replace it.
A lot of times that's a darn hose. Yeah.
Yeah, and then my car drove kind of weird at first, but then now it's driving just fine. It's fine.
Good.
Like, that's all I got to say.
So let's talk about William Shatner going into space at 90 years old. Interesting.
I think that makes him the oldest person to go into space.
Yeah, I think they made a big deal about that, yeah.
So from what my understanding is that he flew into space in a rocket developed by Blue Origin, which is the company that was founded by Jeff Bezos. Mm-hmm. And basically he went into space, and he saw like he was talking about it on Today that he was trying to find something clever to say about the experience, but he said that it doesn't really compare, like nothing could really compare to being in space and looking at our Earth. And he's like, it's a very fragile thing. Like he's like, it looks a lot smaller
than you think. Yeah, because I didn't see the video, but I heard he got very emotional when they came back after the ride. Oh
yeah, he did. He was talking about how like I think one of the things was that he said, I was overwhelmed with the experience, with the sensation of looking at death and looking at life, and what's become a cliche of how we need to take care of the planet. I was struck so profoundly by it.
Yeah.
And I honestly can't imagine a better way to put it, because like I don't know how it would be to go to space. Like I can't possibly imagine like having a certain mindset and then going to space and feeling like you can still be the same person. I don't think you could ever be.
No, I would think it would change you. It's something I will never be doing, not just because of a money issue, but I'm claustrophobic. So I'm not putting on a helmet. I'm not getting in any kind of capsule. I'm not doing it. I'm claustrophobic. I could never do it.
No, I wouldn't be able to do it because I don't think I would ever be able to. Just because of the fact that I try not to think too much about things that I don't think I'll ever do, because I feel like I think going to space is already really expensive, and also just the fact that if I remember correctly, like the Challenger remember Challenger?
Mm-hmm, of course.
That actually really spooked me out of it, because I was thinking, if they got this poor teacher to actually agree with to this, and then and bad things happened, it's like
and you never know. I mean, there's no. Well, I mean, you obviously technologically you have everybody checks everything out, but to a certain degree, you don't know. It's a crapshoot. Anytime that could happen. Yeah. And
the thing about William Shatner is that I was not surprised that he was the first person from Star Trek to be able to go to space. I think that he is,
as far as I know,
because he is. But whether you love him or hate him, whether or not you think his acting is kind of a little choppy, I think the man is sort of the symbol of Star Trek, along with like Leonard Nimoy, who he passed away. And I don't know, like I always wondered why, it's funny because there's another like person who's related to Star Trek that actually was really influential when it came to space, Nichelle Nichols. Nichelle Nichols actually did a lot of training for NASA and actually did a lot of like recruiting for black astronauts on there. So there's this weird connection where like people
and
from
she's
Star Trek.
still around, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Oh, I actually have something to say about Nichelle Nichols. I don't know. Everybody's following the Britney stuff, but Nichelle Nichols is also in a situation like that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. She's been having a lot of problems with her conservatorship, too.
Well, what now? Does she have dementia, or why does she have a conservatorship?
I don't know, because like I was under the impression that like I got the impression that she might be, like just an ordinary like senior citizen, like like somebody who's already kind of like.
So she's starting to lose some mental faculties. I mean, I don't. Normally you don't have one of those unless
dementia.
You have dementia. Okay,
dementia,
she does. Okay,
so that is dementia. Because I was trying to think, what's the other one? I don't know if it's dementia, but she has dementia, and it hasn't really been talked about a lot recently. But she has had a lot of like conservatorship issues where her kid, I believe it's either her kids or somebody related to her that has had like they've been sort of controlling her money, and there's been this sort of conversation about whether or not it's right for them to have that much control over her over her money. And it's actually her son. It's actually her son, Kyle Johnson. And apparently some people were saying that like she is being taken advantage of. That
I hate when that happens. It's just that's so disappointing.
And one of the most controversial aspects of it is that her son actually sold her home.
Without asking her? I mean, just did it?
And they kind of had this conversation about how, since she has dementia, how much agency does she actually have? Like, how easy would it be? Like, for example, if my mother had dementia, how easy would it be for me to take advantage of that,
And it's a very slippery slope kind of gray, because it's apparently in the past I've seen stories where it's easy sometimes for the children or whoever to manipulate the situation and present a picture of the person perhaps being less mentally stable than they really are.
And one of the things was that when Nichelle Nichols got her house sold, apparently one of her friends said that, well, her home is gone and she loved her home.
Where is she living? Is she in a facility?
I think she's actually going to be living with her son. I think that I got the impression that and there's also this video too about how, I think that, I'm trying to look at this article too real quick, but like, I think that Nichelle Nichols will be living with her son, but also apparently Nichelle Nichols doesn't get a lot of visitors, that her visitors' rights are actually being violated. And
is it just the one son? Does she have other children, or just that one son?
I think that's her only son.
I see. That's a problem. That's a problem. If he is her only child and he's like the guy and he's the one that's taking advantage of her, who is in her corner?
And another thing is that like a lot of other people were saying that like Nichelle Nichols never wanted her home sold, and that it's one of those things like, while I'm still alive, keep my home.
Yeah. And
they apparently we're talking about how, and apparently her son felt that that she deserves a bit of a more modest living situation, like not being able to.
It's not his choice to make.
And that's what I was saying too. And so I've had a lot of conversations with people about how Nichelle Nichols doesn't get the press compared to Britney Spears. And, the sad fact of the matter is that I think because Nichelle Nichols is less famous, she'll probably not get that moment, like a Free Britney moment.
Well, and also not only is she not as famous as Britney, but also Britney's situation is more unusual because she's 30 or whatever, versus someone who's older who's got dementia. That's a fairly common situation, so it doesn't get as much attention. Yeah,
and it's sort of like people tend to say. And I kind of, since we live in a community where there's a lot of senior citizens living here, I think that there's sort of this perception that once you turn 70 or 80, that you're a burden, or that you're certainly like not capable of making your own decisions.
And there are many, 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 many people who are doing just fine, who are in great physical health, great mental health. People. There's two kind of categories. I mean, there's some folks who either didn't take care of themselves well when they were younger, or didn't know about nutrition, et cetera, who end up with a lot of ailments as they get older. But there are a lot of people who don't. And I think sometimes people forget that. They think that's really, an oddity, and it's really not. It's really not.
It's sort of like if you want to look good in your 80s, or you want to live until your 80s, it's important to make a lot of decisions in your 20s and 30s to be able to improve your health.
But even if you didn't, let's say you're 40, 40 and 40s, you can make changes now that will help a lot. I mean, change at any point. Make the change. It can't hurt. I mean, it obviously would have been better if you did it in your 20s, but make the change now. And it doesn't mean just because you're 70 or 80 or even 90 that you have to be in a wheelchair and doddering and drooling and not have a brain working.
Also, the idea that people in their 80s and 70s don't have agency, we need to unlearn that. I think the important thing is to let people in their 70s and 80s have their own like conversations and being able to have their own like just to build autonomy to be able to make their decisions. Like if someone wants to get divorced at 70, that's not a big deal.
It's their choice.
Yeah.
And to have society's viewpoint on it change as well, and to stop projecting death and illness and senility on people who are not actually experiencing it.
And you never know, because Nichelle Nichols, she's 88 and I mean, she's lived that long. What would stop anybody from like her to live until 90 or even
95?
95. Like,
look at William Shatner. He's 90 and he's fit enough to go into space and apparently totally cogent. So it happens.
And also George Takei is doing his thing, still active, and he's not that young either. And
Betty White is what? 95?
95.
Whatever she seems to be sharp as a tack, from what I know. Yeah.
I get the impression that another thing is that I'm trying to type in Betty White's age. Yeah. She's 99.
She's 99?
Yes.
God bless her. I hope she makes it to 100. Wow, that would be so great.
That's our hope for next January. We have a couple months.
She's going to make it. She's going to make it. Oh, we'll have to have a big happy birthday, segment in our show when she hits 100.
And I always get excited when I see like celebrities or like people that you adore on TV live for a long time, because you can't get enough of one person's gift in life, and for me, I feel a certain kind of way that Nichelle Nichols, she only has so much time left, and
let her enjoy her life and stop bossing her around and taking. And Wayne Dyer has this one of his tapes, control, the issue of control, and they've done studies in old people's homes. When you start taking control away from people, whether you're 20, 39, they start to fold. Control. If you don't have control of your own life, that is really bad for your mental health.
That's
no
true.
matter how old you are.
No, that's true. And I think that's why it's good that someone like Britney and in her 30s is trying to getting that control.
It back,
because I mean, I'm hoping that more people in their 20s and 30s, if you have a conservatorship, if you feel like don't have some agency, because the conservatorship is more like you can make your decisions, but somebody will help you make them.
Find a way to do the best you can to fight for your own self and control. And we all deserve that. And
autonomy is really important, because think about it. If you don't want someone telling you what to do,
nobody else does either.
Nobody else does too.
All right, we're going to be back with more news and some great guests coming up on the Desert Scene in just a bit.
The Desert Scene on Radio 111. Cultural events and the people who make it happen in the desert cities with Bonnie G and Brayan Mendoza.
And we are back on the Desert Scene. A new story that's been hot, entertainment story, is apparently they're doing a, biopic about Joan Rivers, or a movie or something about Joan Rivers, and have hired a non-Jewish actress to play her. And several people are upset, I guess, particularly Sarah Silverman, right?
Yeah. So one of the arguments, I'm going to present an argument that Sarah Silverman made, and then we'll talk about it. But the actress who's playing Joan Rivers is Kathryn Hahn, who most people agree is a great actress. But Kathryn Hahn is not Jewish, but she has played Jewish parts before. She's done the rabbi in Transparent, which is a show about a Jewish family. So it's sort of one of those things where I think people think she's Jewish, but she's
really not. Yeah.
She's not. And when I watched that, I was like, oh, she's not Jewish, because it actually gets into something that Sarah Silverman said. Sarah Silverman talked about it in her podcast of how she felt that Hollywood has always had a lot of like anti-Semitic tropes, even though there's the conspiracy theory that Jews control Hollywood, which is not true.
Yeah, give me a break.
I mean, if there's a lot of Jewish people in Hollywood, like, so be it. Like, it happens.
Because they're smart business people or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, and it could be any. And honestly, at that point, like, we're starting to see more different kinds of people. So, like, diversity.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that conspiracy theory going away.
Yeah.
And and one of the things about she calls it Jew face. Basically, there's this person. She says that she doesn't really care to see Jew face, which she describes as basically like a non-Jewish actor putting on.
It's similar to blackface, but they're calling it Jew face. Okay.
She also said, like, for example, like, it's not just like the makeup, like the false prosthetic nose,
and
It's also about like having mannerisms or like projecting a certain
or a little
Jewish,
bit of an accent, vocal, whatever. Yeah.
And throwing in Yiddish words, because I actually have a friend who's Jewish who said that like they sometimes get irritated at movies about Jewish people, because movies with Jewish people
because they're caricatures.
They're caricatures, and they're always
Go
nervous.
over the top.
And like, the other thing is that he also feels like they throw in Yiddish words that make no sense. Like, for example, he said that word doesn't mean what that.
Yeah, they just throw in Yiddish word just to throw one in. Yeah.
And like, I saw another movie where he said, they, like, for example, they'll be like, my kosh is, I don't know how to put it, but like, I don't want to accidentally do it, but like, basically there was a movie where somebody said this vaketa fish is labushin on my vadashad, something like that. And I told him, does that mean anything? He's like, no, that's a bunch of gibberish.
Okay.
And so one of the things she said was that Joan Rivers was a person that was very much defined by being a Jew. Like, her Jewness was part of her
act. Yeah.
Act. And so she feels that a Jewish actor should have had more priority as opposed to Catherine Hahn, even though she says Catherine Hahn is great and she'll do a great job as Joan because she obviously could do it.
But did they, I guess the question would be, did they audition a number of Jewish actresses before just going with her? That would be my question.
I think the idea was that Catherine Hahn, because she got nominated for an Emmy for WandaVision, and everyone thought she should have won for playing the witch Agatha Harkness, and so she's kind of hot right now. So everybody wants her in their programs, and I think that Catherine Hahn's casting is sort of meant to be sort of like the next step in her career. Like, hey, let's give her a biopic, because I think everyone wants to see her succeed, and because everybody really likes her right now. So there's that. And the fact is that Sarah Silverman, I'm not saying that Sarah Silverman has a bad argument. I just don't think she should be the messenger, because I'll show you Bonnie, but then we can show our audience. Right. She's not exactly someone that I trust with that. Yep.
What was that from?
Sarah Silverman did a skit in 2007 where she put on minstrel makeup. And I was kind of like, she talked about how she was horrified by it. So I'm saying to her, like,
she was horrified after she did it? Why did she do it then?
Like, that's what I'm wondering. Like,
was that for SNL, or do you remember what that was for?
That was for her show, the Sarah Silverman show. Okay. So one of the things about her show is that she was always like pushing the envelope. But one of the things that bothers me is the fact that Sarah Silverman did a very, if it's not blackface, it's very
close. It's pretty darn close.
It's one step away from it. Like, you just need one more thing.
Yeah.
And she even admits that she was horrified by it. So I think this is sort of like her, where I feel like I don't really trust her as the authority. Like, I think the concept makes sense, like Jew face.
Maybe someone else should be the spokesperson for being upset about it instead of her. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I saw that, I was like, Sarah, you can't do this.
So what do you, Brian, personally feel about, in general, a non-Jewish person playing somebody well-known who was obviously Jewish? What do you think about that?
I think that there's always going to be, I will always have a preference for an actor of a certain ethnicity or nationality to have that role.
Have the first shot anyway.
Because I feel like, for example, like, it's just that there isn't enough roles for certain people. So for example, like, it'd be great to see like a Jewish actor who is very much in love with being Jewish get that part. And so I think in the case of Catherine Hahn, it's going to be always a very second lens away from it.
Right.
So I think it depends on the movie, but overall, I think that actors should have share some basic things.
To have some
with
life
her.
experience that they can really bring truly to the character.
Yeah. And also because I feel like people have this perception that acting is being someone else. No, acting is performing a character.
And
you
always bring some of yourself and your past into it. Always.
Because nobody would ever accuse Katharine Hepburn of being a bad actress, but she always put herself in those parts. So it makes sense for a Jewish actor to get. Okay,
we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have my buddy Ron Celona, CV, Artistic Director, CV Rep, telling us what's coming up in their season.
Bonnie and Brian continue with the Desert Scene on Radio 111. Here they are.
And we're back on the Desert Scene, and we're joined now by Ron's a vet. He's been on the show many times, both live and on the phone. Ron Celona is the Artistic Director, CV Rep, and they've got. We're so happy that live theater is emerging, coming back into the place. Hey, Ron, how are you doing?
I'm great, Bonnie. Thank you, and thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
Your wonderful program.
So tell us what's coming up at CV Rep.
Well, it's thrilled to be able to share. We have a season.
Yay.
We weren't so sure after being closed over a year and a half, and it's been scary for all theater throughout the country. So we're thrilled to be able to announce that we are opening on November 9th with our first play.
Yay.
Bakersfield Mist by Stephen Sachs. It's a fun play. It is based on a true life story.
Okay.
Basically, an unemployed bartender named Maud, living in a trailer park in Bakersfield, buys a painting for a few bucks from a thrift store, despite almost trashing it. She now is convinced it's the lost masterpiece by Jackson Pollock worth millions of dollars.
Oh, okay.
So what happens here is an expert from New York comes out to see, is it real or isn't it? And that's where the fun begins.
Excellent. So this is
it's just be a great place. And like I said, it was based on a real story of a Pollock painting that was forged by an artist, believe it or not, in Palm Springs.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a fun story.
So it's
then we're gonna. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's just a two-person play.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a two-person play, and I have a pretty thrilling thing to share. That it is going to be performed by a real-life husband and wife actors.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Really, Arthur Hankett and Stephanie Erb are both husband and wife, and they are coming out to start rehearsals next week.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And they're both superb. And in fact, Stephanie is quite a celebrity. She's a TV and film actress on recurring roles, TV. Okay. And so it's a coup to have them both in this production.
Excellent. So what's after that?
After that, on January 25th through February 6th, we have Lifetimes 3 by Yasmina Reza. Many people will know her work from the play Art.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is an interesting piece in that there are 4 people in this play, and it's 2 couples. And one couple is at home, and they're basically getting ready to entertain the husband's boss and his wife, but they come a day early. And they are not prepared at all. And what's interesting about this piece and how its title came to be is it's a 3-act play done in 3 short acts. Each act is the same scene performed completely differently, as though what would happen if this happened, or if that happened. How would the evening go? So it's really quite an interesting study in human behavior and how we as people in any situation, it could play out completely different based on the things we say and how we act.
Yeah, one little sentence said a different way could change everything. Yeah.
So it's really a fascinating study, and I think people will really enjoy that. Okay. Then we do our one musical of the season, Closer Than Ever, music by David Shire and lyrics by Richard Maltby Jr. Mm-hmm. This is a musical review, and it shares the best music. It's just a beautiful piece, and it's about human relations as well. Mm-hmm. There are 4 people in that piece as well. And the music is just spectacular, and I think people will really enjoy all of the different relationship scenarios. They don't play the same people. In other words, each song, they're depicting a different life situation of different people.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And we close out our season on April 12th through April 24th with Native Gardens. That was the play we were supposed to end in the 2020 season with.
Right.
But that never happened. So since it was in April. So I'm really excited to be able to, present this play, but also to give the actors that we cast 2.5 years ago the opportunity to still have the work.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. And that piece is fascinating in that it takes place in Washington, D.C. They're side-by-side homes, and one is an established home of older couple who basically have this prized garden, and the other house has been abandoned. And a young Latina couple buy the home, and it is wonderful to sort of see how they want to create a native garden, native to the region of Washington, and not, in other words, plants that don't exist in that region. And very, very much sort of environmentally conscious. And that goes totally against the neighbors. Mm-hmm. And it becomes friction first about the gardens and then other issues in life, like cultural differences, age difference, and certainly racism comes into play.
Yeah.
But it's done as a comedy. Mm-hmm. So it's a terrific, the writer Karen Zacharias has done an amazing job at sort of sharing this story in a very comfortable and wonderful way to receive and to hopefully have people walk out of the theater learning some really good lessons.
Yeah, and which is one of the things you hope theater does. I mean, besides making people entertaining, laughing, crying, you want them to think. Yeah, and sometimes maybe disturb, ruffle a few feathers. But yeah, lessons are absolutely part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, CV Rep's mission is thought-provoking theater of substance.
Right.
So it falls right in line with what we do.
Right.
And falls in line with our theme, hopes, dreams, and expectations.
Yeah. So tell me, how are you handling? How is CV Rep handling because CV Rep that's a large theater. You see a lot of people. How are you handling the whole mask, non-mask, vaccination, all that kind of stuff with your audience?
Great question. We have gone back and forth with different rules as the COVID crisis, I will call it, pursued. And in the end, with the new variant happening, we have decided that it will be a mandatory vaccination. You have to show your vaccination card and ID at the door. Mm-hmm. And we are having a full audience of masked mandatory as well.
Okay.
And for an hour and a half, people can wear a mask and watch a show. That's what they're doing on Broadway. That's what they're doing in regional theater. And we're falling in line with the same rules.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it was one of the things I was really happy to see when I watched the Tonys, that everyone in the audience had a mask on. I thought that was great. I thought that was a fabulous thing.
Well, it's protecting themselves and protecting other people around them. And this is what we have to do. I mean, if one person gets sick at CV Rep, the show's going to shut down.
Right, exactly.
And so if we want to keep live theater happening during this time, we don't have a choice. I mean, our hope is that things change, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll reevaluate this before the January show.
Right.
And if things are so much better, well, we'll change the rules accordingly. But, one day at a time.
Right. Now, have you had any, because I know it's all such a lot of controversy, a lot of political stuff going on. Have you had any pushbacks yet about the rule as it is now for this first show coming up?
I'm happy to say it's been very small percentage.
Okay.
So, for example, our subscription base at the moment is around 600, and we had 5 subscribers want refunds.
Wow.
And basically say, we're not going to come unless you don't require, we don't want to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Well, if I lose 5 subscribers, I think that percentage is pretty good.
Yeah.
Because I think that there are probably more people that are happy that we're doing the mandatory mask than not.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what would you say in the time we have left? I like to think that all of us have learned, have grown and changed and evolved and maybe learned a few lessons in the past 18 months, 2 years that we've been dealing with this. What would you say from a professional standpoint, as a theater person, an artistic director, what have you learned or how have you changed, would you say, since the pandemic started?
Oh, boy. I have definitely changed, Bonnie. There's no question. I think patience is really a big part of it. Because, let's face it, it was a huge disappointment for everyone in the theater, and unemployment for so many people and workers, and people don't realize how many people work behind the scenes
right
that have lost their jobs. And so I think perseverance, patience, and back to our theme, hope, dreams, and expectations.
Yeah. So let's get...
only expect the best and go with the work.
You have to, yeah. So, Ron, real quick, phone number and website for those who aren't season subscribers. How do people get tickets?
So, website, cvrep.org, cvrep.org.
Okay.
And phone, 760-296-2966.
Well, those are both pretty easy. Yeah, cvrep.org or 760-296-2966. Real quick, did you have, I know this has been an issue for lots of live performance venues, did you have trouble getting, since things had to be canceled and shuffled around because of the pandemic, did you have trouble getting the actors or rehiring or getting the actors that you wanted for the shows coming up this season because of that, because of the delays?
It was a totally different process. The unions have made us do all of our initial auditions online.
Yeah.
So here I am casting live theater from videos.
Yeah.
And that's not the best way to cast an actor.
Yeah.
But for live theater. So ultimately, I didn't have a choice. So we did it that way for our first production, and we'll do it that way for the second production. And then they do allow live callbacks.
Oh, good. Okay.
However, I could only see 6 people for each role. So maybe I had 8 people that are right, and let me see them for a callback. Well, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I could only see 6 people for each role. And that was a challenge. It really was. And and that's, you go with the flow of what has to be until things change.
Yeah. All right. Hopes, dreams, and expectations. That's the theme for the CV Rep season. Ron Celona. So congratulations. I'm so glad live theater's back, and it sounds like a great season coming up. Fabulous.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks for being here. All right. Ron Celona.
Thanks.
We'll be back with much more on the Desert Scene in just a bit.
From musical theater to literature and all the other stuff we enjoy in between, making desert life so vibrant. You're listening to Bonnie G and Brayan Mendoza and the Desert Scene on Radio 111. Here's Bonnie and Brayan.
And we're back. We got an interesting news story. So Cher is suing Mary Bono, Sonny Bono's widow, for some of the rights, the money from the rights from all the music.
Yeah,
right?
so the Sonny and Cher musical library has, obviously made a lot of money over the years. And
still does, yeah.
Still does. It's obviously still been a thing that everybody knows. Like, I would even say that there's an argument to be made that some of the best music that Cher's ever made is the Sonny and Cher.
Yeah, a lot of people would say that.
And it's one of those things where, like, Cher finally felt that she's basically suing for a potentially $1 million lawsuit.
Because now, is she alleging that Mary Bono's just kind of keeping money and not letting her know? Or how is Mary Bono doing this? Do we know?
She basically is saying that she's wrongfully withholding royalties. So songs like I Got You Babe and The Beat Goes On, that apparently that there's apparently what had happened was that they had a 50-50 split
with Cher and Sonny's estate, and Sonny's gone now, so yeah.
And so they felt like that this is because even though they divorced, they still felt that they're professional, but it's a professional thing to do, which is split, because you can't, because believe it or not, I don't think either one can actually take full credit for Sonny and Cher. Certainly not.
Yeah, that was a pretty equal thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't even, and for the most part, there's nothing like a big controversy like Ike and Tina Turner. Like, we know that situation. Yeah. So like that's if Ike doesn't receive money from that, no one's gonna complain. You know, like no one. Like if Ike never received.
Sad but true. Yeah.
Because Ike Turner,
he was a jerk. Yeah.
Jerk.
Okay.
And like. What happened was that, like, basically Cher said that what had happened was that Mary Bono, through the Bono Collection Trust, told Cher allegedly that she would be cut off for royalties for the Sonny and Cher hits I Got You Babe, The Beat Goes On.
Because why?
And who knows, like that actually surprised me too.
Was there a reason given?
No, she just got told that she's no longer getting it. And so the notice of termination was actually like the thing that got Cher to actually do this, because
I'm not surprised. Yeah,
because because the lawsuit said that Cher has been the unchallenged owner of her 50% of all musical composition and record royalties for that many years. And that even though they haven't given an exact dollar amount, basically Cher is saying that she is sustaining damages and will continue to sustain damages until she gets like that amount of money. Yeah. And pretty much Mary Bono has been pretty silent about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure what her argument could be. I mean, what is she based? Well, we're stopping it right now because I feel like it. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a reason.
And to me, it's kind of weird because I would imagine that she has her own like financial ability to financial security.
Oh, I'm sure she does.
She does, you know, because she
was Sonny's widow when he died. They were still married, so I'm sure she got whatever from him.
Yeah. And I don't think Cher would ever like say, hey, Mary, we're going to take that money away from you, because obviously I think Cher would be cool enough to let Sonny's wife have money.
Yeah, you have yours, and neither one of them are starving. I mean, neither one, and of course Mary Bono made money as a congresswoman too, so neither one of them are starving. But
I think yes, I actually agree. None of them are starving. Like if none of them ever did anything anymore, they'd be good.
Fine.
They'd be fine. But I think it's also about the principle of like your work and getting your credit for your work. Because I imagine like if you put out a song 50 years ago and it had royalties attached to it, I think that, or a song put out 20, 30 years ago, you would be mad if they cut it off, right?
There's no reason for that. Yeah.
And I don't know, because I do know, actually. I was going to say Cher actually deserves that money, in my opinion.
I mean, it's interesting that no one has given an argument as to what is Mary Bono's argument on this side. There is none.
I'm trying to think what would be an argument, because like there would be, I can't think of it, because it's one of those things where I have a feeling they're going to settle it out of court.
Probably, yeah.
Because I think what's going to happen is either A, she settles it out of court, or B, she just stops. You know,
Mary Bono stops, withdraws the thing, yeah.
Yeah, and then she might have to share some money because this is considered damages, which means, like, I'm not a lawyer by any means, but I get the impression that means, like, as long as she doesn't receive the money, she's technically receiving damages like that, like not being able to actually.
Well, I mean, unless, and obviously, if this were the case, we would have heard about it. Unless there was an agreement in this original legal thing that said, well, as of October 2021, you're not getting this anymore. Unless that was in the agreement, which I'm sure it wasn't, there is no reason for this.
Also,
except spite.
Or even like after this set amount of years, neither one of us gets it, you know, because, I mean, because how Sonny died was an accident.
It's horrible. Yeah.
Like, the fact is that no matter what, if there was a contract where Sonny and Cher were told, after 50 or 60 years, you can't receive royalties.
Well, that's different.
Then it would have affected Sonny if he was alive.
Right.
So it does, to have this be like a Mary Bono imposed thing doesn't make sense. No. And so I honestly think it's a little, I'm trying to be nice about it, foolish.
Yeah, you know, Cher's going to prevail.
She's going to win.
I think
there's no way.
Be a shock if she didn't. Yeah. All right, we'll be back with more. And actually, next hour, we're going to welcome Jeanette Knight, talking about a big improv festival coming up in just a bit on the Desert Scene.
From architecture to painting and sculpture, literature to live music and theater, Radio 111 presents Bonnie G. and Brayan Mendoza with The Desert Scene, your connection to culture and entertainment in the desert cities. Here's Bonnie and Brayan.
And we are back on the Desert Scene, and now we're joined by a friend who's been on the show before, Jeanette Knight. She is she's actually a director, choreographer, but one of her big things is improv, and she's, I think, put together this big improv festival and comedy festival coming up next weekend. Hi, Jeanette, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Bonnie?
Good. So tell us, this is exciting. Tell us all about this festival coming up.
Okay, well, it takes place October 23rd and 24th, like you said, next weekend. And we have shows. We have 2 matinees. The matinees represent the finalists from people all across the nation that submitted videos. So on Saturday at 2:30, we have improv and sketch groups. And on Sunday at 2:30, we have stand-up comics. And these are people that submitted videos, and then I have a panel of industry professionals who view the videos, give them a score. So these are the top scoring acts. So there's some really funny and talented people that are performing as part of these matinees. And then in the evening, both evenings, Saturday at 7:30 p.m., we have some headliners. And those people are opening. We have, I'm looking at my notes here and looking on I get confused myself.
Okay.
But opening Saturday night at 7:30 is Mary Gallagher. She is a stand-up comic who made her debut on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert in 2018. Okay. Very funny. And following her is Steve Middleman, who's a stand-up comic, one of the few stand-up comics that appeared on The Tonight Show with both Johnny Carson and Jay Leno as hosts. And then following him, they're each doing a half an hour. And then the last half hour is the winners from our last festival. Their name is Red Door, and they are an improv comedy group. So that's Saturday night. Do you want me to describe Sunday night?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because Sunday night is also a lot of fun. That's we call it Sunday night headliners, and we start out by honoring a couple of local people that have made big contributions to comedy. Joyce Bulifant, who was a regular on the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Fabulous, yeah.
Yeah, and Steve Bluestein, who is a stand-up comic, very funny, and he just did an engagement in Las Vegas. He just got back from that. And he also was a founding member of the Groundlings. So we begin by honoring them, and then that's followed by a performance by a very funny sketch comedy duo called Pure and Weary, a couple of gals from L.A. They won the sketch comedy category at our last festival. And following Pure and Weary is stand-up comic Jason Stewart, who is hilarious. He won the stand-up comedy category at our last festival. And then apart from that, we have workshops for people who actually want to get in and try this kind of stuff.
So tell us about the workshops. Say you were somebody who, maybe they've done a little acting and they always were curious about improv. So tell us about what would happen at these workshops.
Okay, well, Saturday morning from 11 to 1, we have a workshop being done by Red Door, who they are also performing Saturday night. They're an improv duo. And they do it's a very physical workshop, so they guide fun physical explorations that are really designed to get you out of your head and into your body, because that's what messes us up a lot with improv, is that we're trying to say the funny thing, the right thing, the best thing. And so that's really what their workshop is about. Then at the same time, happening at the same time, Jason Stewart is teaching a workshop called The Business of Show Business, and he's going to work one-on-one with everyone in that workshop about really being in the business and sustaining a life in the business, because he's been in there for years. And he's going to, go over their pictures, resumes, bios, social media.
Right.
And then I love Mary Gallagher's workshop Sunday morning from 11 to 1. It's called Getting on Late Night TV, because she made that a goal. She took a break from stand-up after raising her daughter and made a goal to get on late night TV, and she actually achieved that. But on a deeper level, she explains that it's about really connecting emotionally with yourself, because the funniest stand-up comics and comedians in general are people that make it personal.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's what her workshop is about. And those are all open to the public.
And so for tickets, now this is taking place at CV Rep, correct?
Yes, Coachella Valley Repertory, which is, as you know, where the old IMAX theater used to be. So it's a great facility, beautiful facility, not a bad seat in the house because of that extreme rake. And so for tickets, people would go to cvrep.org. And then they would have to click, there's a tab for the festival, or they can call the box office 760-296-2966. Tickets start at $20 each, and the box office is open Monday through Friday from 10:30 to 5.
Excellent. So I want to ask you, for people who don't know anything or much about improv, and or are afraid of it. I've known some stage actors who are great with a script, but when you start talking about improv, they get really nervous. What would you say to them? How would you assuage somebody's nerves, or how would you explain what improv is in a way that doesn't seem threatening to people?
Well, I love that question. First of all, I want to say that a lot of agents now won't take on actors unless they take some improv training. But most really good improv teachers, and I have a real affinity for improvisers in general, make a point out of creating a very safe, supportive atmosphere. It's not about coming up with the perfect scenario or the funniest scenario. It's learning to be children again, to be spontaneous and fun and not overthink things. So it's really nothing to be afraid of. I would tell anyone that has a fear of it. And, after years of doing it, I'm still a little afraid of it. And so most people in a class like that will have a certain level of fear.
Uh-huh.
But knowing these two fellas that are teaching the improv workshop on Saturday morning, they are just super nice guys and will guide you in a gentle, loving, supportive way.
Yeah. Brian has a question for you.
It's almost like a two-part question because I actually had to rethink my question a bit because I think you answered it. But I was going to say that I was trying to think, like, what do you think distinguishes someone who really becomes a character through improv as opposed to someone just spouting a bunch of random stuff? And what makes a great teacher of improv? Like, what do you have to do to become a great teacher? And overall, just how do you distinguish the very best improv students and all that?
Yeah, a lot of questions, Brian. I love it. Yeah, I think a great improv teacher has to be improvisational in their teaching. I think they have to sense how their teaching is working with the participants and adjust accordingly. And you were talking about characters in improv. I love that question because in my years of playing with it, I've noticed that the most interesting scenes are ones that bring characters to them. We always talk about it's okay to represent any kind of character as long as you do it with love and respect. Mm-hmm. But to just spout a bunch of knowledge or information back and forth and be talking heads, that seems to be less entertaining or less fun for the audience. And so characters are a great deal of fun with improv, in my opinion.
I just love that. I was going to say, I just love what you said, which was you can play any character as long as you're respectful about it. Because we actually had a conversation earlier on the show of what Sarah Silverman had said about Catherine Hahn playing Joan Rivers
and not being Jewish, and when people get upset about people doing characters, either an actor of the ethnicity or whatever not being cast, or sometimes people doing caricatures and kind of going over the top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in this, it's interesting because now I'm thinking of the stand-up category because we have a very diverse group of stand-up comics. We have one that is part of the autism community. We have an African-American stand-up comic that talks a lot about this idea of being woke. And so I love how diverse they are. We have Jason Stewart is a very big part of the LGBTQ community. He founded one of the, it's a task force with SAG-AFTRA that he founded. So, I'm really proud of the fact that it just kind of ended that way, that, their scores were the highest because they were the funniest. And it goes back to that idea of being personal with the material because it's so true to them. It helps make it funny. Yeah.
I'm curious. I know you've worked with children before. Do you do improv with kids? And if so, do you find that they have less fear about it?
I do. I teach 3 days a week up at the Idlewild Arts Academy. And I have taught improv up there for many years. And I do find that they seem to have more freedom with it. Mm-hmm. And these are teenagers who can sometimes be very conscious of what their peers think of them, but they do seem to have much more freedom when they're improvising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you, just to get to you personally, so you do improv, you teach improv, you also, you choreograph and you direct plays as well, right? So would you say improv is your number one hat that you wear?
I would say it's probably my number one love.
Okay.
It's my passion. It's something that I'm just drawn to without really being able to explain why. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I can say that every good improv class that I've gone to, the improv classes I've gone to where I walked away just thinking, oh, that was great.
Yeah.
it also seemed like a great acting class to me.
Absolutely.
So, so going back to your original question, I too know actors that are afraid of improv, and the two just overlap, I think.
Yeah. Jeanette, we're running out of time. Sorry so much, but Jeanette, thank you so much. So the big improv festival coming up next weekend, CV Rep 760-296-2966. Check it out. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both. Thanks.
All right, Jeanette and I will be back with more on the Desert Scene in just a bit.
He likes to read. She likes to sing and act. They both love the Coachella Valley. And they love talking about the desert scene with you on Radio 111. Here's Bonnie G. and Brayan Mendoza.
So if you haven't heard Dave Chappelle, the conversation has been Dave Chappelle. Oh my Lord. But you know what? It's just...
What did he say? I've heard this. I didn't know what was it he said that upset people. What was the issue, basically?
So he has a comedy special on Netflix called The Closer, and it's very much one of those things where it's just more or less the way you can examine it rather than what actually was said. He said, so in it he talked about cancel culture and how like he feels like the LGBT community is very like hypersensitive, and he also feels that he said, I can get away with making jokes about black people, but making a joke about an LGBT person, I get ostracized. Which, I almost want to tell him, there have been people that have gotten canceled for race jokes, racist jokes, so I would be mindful,
Yeah.
But basically, he talked about J.K. Rowling, who, we all know famously doesn't really care for trans folks, or has gotten a lot of controversy, to put it that way. Don't sue us, JK. But I was gonna say, so basically he said, my God, they canceled JK Rowling and they called her a TERF. Well, I'm team TERF. And TERF is a term that's used to mean trans exclusionary radical feminist. So basically somebody who, I don't call them feminists personally, but basically somebody who uses feminism to exclude trans people from the conversation. Basically, a feminist is someone who I've always pictured as all women, whereas a TERF is like only biological cis women, and that's their wording.
Yeah.
I don't use the word biological, but basically because of those comments, Dave Chappelle's been the subject of conversations and pieces online about how like jokes for the most part can be harmful to society if they're not dealt well. Like if your joke is like anti-trans, it could feed into anti-transness and all that. And so a lot of like there have been meetings at Netflix that have been crashed by trans employees who feel a certain way about it, that they really feel like this is an injustice. And there have also been like, there is the producer of Dear White People, a show that's on Netflix, has said they will no longer work with them. I think they're a trans woman and they're no longer working on Netflix. And another LGBT writer that used to do a special on Netflix called Hannah Gadsberry has officially distanced herself from Netflix. Basically, the idea is that a lot of employees at Netflix who are trans and LGBT don't want to be involved with Netflix because they feel like you put out a bunch of specials by LGBT people, but you're making money off of us as opposed to like really supporting us. And one of the things is that there have been a lot of conversations about who's really getting canceled, because a few Netflix employees who are trans have been fired for speaking out against this, and also they've passed out a lot of pink slips, especially to one person who spilled some confidential financial information about Netflix out of protest. And there's also going to be a walkout on October 20th by trans employees of Netflix. So a lot is going on with all because of a special on Netflix.
Now, so has Dave Chappelle himself had any consequences from any of this at this point? Do you know?
if anything, he probably benefited from it
got
because
PR,
he got
press.
I mean, Dave Chappelle's never been. He's always
spoken out.
He's always spoken out and
ruffled feathers. Too.
Yeah, and I do want to give one thing I want to say is Dave Chappelle making jokes about his own people, about black people, is different than him making jokes about trans people.
It really is. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's. I know sometimes people say, wow, oh my gosh, there's so many rules and political correctness and this and that. But you know what it really comes down to, in my view, is common courtesy and consideration for your fellow human being.
And also, you know, Jeanette earlier was saying, I'm not trying to misquote her, but like your own experiences matter when you make jokes, you know, like what is tried and true and all.
Right.
Sometimes there's truth in comedy. And for example, like if I made jokes about being Latino, they'd be funnier because, you know, I've actually lived
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Versus, let's say, I have a feeling like if you made a joke about, let's say, being Latino, but you're not Latino.
I would never do that.
No, but I understand. But it's but I have a feeling, even though you'll be respectful as best as you can, it wouldn't be as funny because
absolutely,
your reference point would be stereotypes as opposed to me, where my reference point is like my lived experience.
Yeah.
And I also think, for example, that Dave Chappelle, he said, you know, he feels liberated and that a lot of people have backed him up. Just to be honest, like there have been people that have backed him up. My personal opinion is that, you know, like I think it's one of those things where it just wasn't necessary. It's like your philosophy. Is it kind? Is it necessary?
Is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? And, you know, now in comedy, I realize with comedy, you know, not everybody, there are a lot of comics that don't always consider the kind thing, but you have to balance it out. You have to weigh each situation.
You are doing a kindness though when you punch up towards systems that hurt people. So for example,
exactly.
So like if you made a joke about racism and the joke is at the racist expense, you're doing a kindness for race victims.
Exactly. Right.
Or like I saw a comedic sketch where a homophobe basically gets not incinerated physically, but like metaphorically in the joke. And it was so funny to me because the audience member was being heckled by a homophobe, but that was a kindness. You were making fun of a homophobe, but that was a kindness to the person who was really suffering. Right. So yes, it is kind.
Yeah.
You know.
Interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see, you know, how many people leave Netflix and if Dave Chappelle ever suffers anything. But yeah, you know, there's always but just think, even if you're a comic, just kind of think about how it's going to affect other people when you speak. That's my philosophy. Okay, we'll be back with Brian Scott. He's back in town. Yay. In just a bit on the Desert Scene.
Bonnie and Brian continue with the Desert Scene on Radio 111. Here they are.
And we are back on the Desert Scene, and I'm hoping in just a moment we're going to talk to the fabulous Brian Scott. He's a wonderful singer who is really all over town for quite a while. Moved back to, I believe it was Oklahoma for a bit, but he is back in the desert, and he's doing a big show with my friend Siobhan Velarde, actually tonight at Runway. And I think we're going to talk with him in just a moment. He's a wonderful country singer. And do we have Brian on? All right. Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Bonnie, how are you doing?
Good. So you just drove into town, last night? Did you just get in?
Yeah, actually we got in here 2 days ago. And we have been running like chickens trying to get everything all put together here.
Now, was it Oklahoma? Is that where you had moved to?
Yeah, we lived in Oklahoma City for the past 2 years. And we had a great time out there. But, you know, the valley is home.
Yeah.
So we knew eventually we would make it back here, and luck had it that just everything fell into place, and here we are back home.
Excellent. So tell us. I've met you a few times, and I've heard wonderful things. I know you sing with Siobhan, but tell me, I don't know much about you and your background. So are you from Oklahoma originally?
No, originally born and raised in Orange County, California.
Oh, okay.
And then, and then I moved out to the desert in 1999.
Okay.
I've been singing all my life. I studied music, and I started with choirs in high school and junior high school. And then in college, I studied musical theater and music theory. And when Garth Brooks came onto the scene, that's when my entire life changed. So I became a country singer after that. I went from musical theater to country music, and I've never looked back. Country's been my entire existence up until now. Siobhan's kind of gotten me into like the blues and things like that. So I'm kind of widening my horizons, as you would say. But country is my main thing. And then I was lucky and blessed enough to get a television show on ABC a few years back with Carney Wilson and Joey Fatone from NSYNC.
Wow.
We traveled all around the United States looking for talent. The show was called Karaoke Battle USA, and it was on ABC.
Okay.
And I got a little national fame out of that, and I've just been singing my country music ever since.
Wow. Now, before Garth Brooks came on the scene, had you thought about country before that, or did he just totally change your focus?
Well, I always loved country music. I grew up in a family where a lot of rock and roll was played, and even though I liked it, it just didn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
So I was listening to Kenny Rogers when I was young, Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, the Gatlin Brothers, things like that. But I just never fell in love with it until Garth Brooks.
Okay.
And then Garth came on the scene, and I thought, wow, I want to be just like this guy, So I emulated what he was doing until I could find my own style. And I've just loved it ever since. It's in my heart.
Yeah. Well, you sound kind of like a country guy. I mean, have you developed that as well, sort of that country swagger and that whole thing?
Yeah, there's a little twang in my music for sure. I don't twang as much as some of them, but I do throw that in there. My mother's from Arkansas. We spent a lot of time in that state, and being in that kind of environment, it seems to lend itself nicely to my music.
So I always love, because I'm a singer and I have a lot of friends who are singers and actors, and I'm always curious about everyone else's sort of methods. So first of all, do you, before you do a show, before you do a performance, do you have any rituals, meditations, prayers, lucky socks, anything that you do before a show?
Lucky socks.
Well, some people have lucky things they wear,
Yeah, exactly. I don't. The only thing I do is warm up my vocals, because I every show I give 110%. So I'm never going to give them a lackluster vocal. So I always make sure that in the shower, it's mostly in the shower when there's a lot of steam and stuff. I'll do my do re mi fa sol la ti dos, and keep the chords healthy. That's kind of my main thing. I don't really have any other rituals that I go through, or lucky hats or anything like that. But,
okay. Now, a couple of questions. First of all, do you read music? Do you play anything? Play any instruments?
I can read music. I do read music. I play a little guitar, a little piano. That's how I write my music, because I do a lot of my own compositions. But I've never really had the gumption to get on stage with the guitar or anything like that. It's one of those things where I leave that up to the professionals, and then I just carry it with my vocals.
And you answered my next question. I was going to ask if you write. Now, so do you write both music and lyrics for things? I
do. I write. It all comes out of my head, and I put it all out on a video, a recorder, and then I get with my piano player, and we find the chords, and then we birth the song, basically. From there, it's all in my head. It all comes out together, interesting enough. I've heard a lot of people say, I write the lyrics first, and then I do the melodies. Yeah. But it all comes to me together in one. It's interesting how I write my music.
Interesting. Now, a couple other questions. First of all, was your family supportive? You decided at some point that this was going to be your basic career. Were they supportive of that, of you being a performer?
Yes. My family was very, very supportive. I've lost my mother and father, but they were my biggest fans. Yeah, they went to as many shows as I could get them to come and see. They were, my dad, we called him Papa. Papa came out here to live with me in the Valley. And he he loved going to all my shows and stuff. So he was my biggest fan. So I got a lot of support, a lot of support. And when I was younger, my dad's like, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I want to be a singer." And I remember him used to saying, "Well, Brian, you need to do something that's going to make you some money." And I thought, well, why can't that make me money? So he trained me to, get that foundation. And I was a graphic designer for 18, 20 years. I owned my own restaurant for 8 years.
Oh, okay.
I owned my own retail store for 5 years. So I know business, but music is my life, and that's where I'm at.
You just answered another question. I was going to ask you if you ever had what I called a job. So tell me about the restaurant. Was that in California? The restaurant you owned?
That was in a state in New Mexico, in a little place called Ruidoso, New Mexico, 7,000 feet. And it was a beautiful little ski resort town, and it was called the Blue Goose Cafe. And we were a lunch restaurant with gourmet soup, salads, and sandwiches. And we ran that little place for 8 years. And boy, did I learn a lot about hard work.
I bet. I mean, that seems like one of the toughest jobs ever, is running a restaurant.
It is. You think when you go into it, like, oh, it's going to be so cute and fun, and I'll get to, enjoy the rest. And I'll get to sing in my own restaurant. I thought I was going to get to sing in my own restaurant, but you know what? I was busy making food, or cleaning toilets, or doing anything and everything I could to make that restaurant work.
But don't you think, though? I always think that whether you're a singer or an actress or actor performing, that those kinds of life experiences only make your performing richer. I think, because you have all those experiences to draw on.
Absolutely. And I always tell people when I'm writing my material, I can't write about some fluffy stuff that I've not lived through.
Right.
If I lived through it, I can write about it. And it comes from the heart. I remember when my mother passed away from a rare cancer, I was driving back to New Mexico from the funeral, and with tears in my eyes, the 12-hour drive, I wrote this beautiful, beautiful song in memory of her called "Mama, It's Okay, Let Go, You Can Let Go," and it was it's a beautiful tune, and it'll probably be in my set for the show tonight.
Okay, now that you are the best guest I've ever had on segueing me into the next thing I want to talk about. Okay, so the show. So tonight, Brian, so much BS. I love that, the name. So much BS. BS is in Brian Scott.
Yes.
Brian Scott with Siobhan Velarde, who's become a dear friend of mine. We did a show called Bosom Buddies at Runway. She is just fabulous.
Isn't she fantastic?
Yeah, and you've worked with her many times, right? Before you moved.
A lot, yes. We've done so many shows together. We do a lot of country club gigs together. We've worked with PS Underground together. We've worked at Pete's Hideaway together, and Runway as well. So it's been a beautiful journey with my Siobhan.
So tell us a little bit about the show and how you put the show together with her.
Well, the show comes together with me begging her to do country music with me.
Okay.
She's all, "I don't do country. I never have done country." She goes, "But with you, Brian, I'll do country."
Yeah.
So we combined forces, and we've put some duets together, and she'll do a little mix of the blues in there with her country. But she has she doesn't realize it enough, but she has such a country twang to her that is so natural.
I've heard her do some country. She's fabulous. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she is so good at what she does. And we just combine it together, and we laugh, we joke, we have a great time on stage, and it's a perfect combination.
All right, so that's tonight, Runway. So much BS. Brian Scott and Siobhan Velarde at Runway, 7:30 to 9. You can go to Eventbrite, pre-sale tickets, $20 at the door, $30. Food and drink not included. Let's see, seating not guaranteed. But Runway is fabulous. If you haven't been there, it's a fun little club behind. If you go down 111 in Cathedral City, the big revivals. If you're going to go back behind the service roads behind there, it's a wonderful little club. Question for you: do you have a go-to or favorite one or two country songs? When someone says, "Brian, get up and sing a country song," what's your go-to song?
Oh my gosh, I have so many, Bonnie. Like I said, Garth Brooks, If Tomorrow Never Comes is one of my
that's
go-tos.
That's a great one, yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful number, and a lot of George Strait, Amarillo by Morning.
Oh yeah.
And, just I love classic country, so I mix it with classic, the '90s country, and the new country. I mix it all together.
I was going to ask you, do you like? Some people don't really like the new country because it doesn't seem as pure country. But what do you feel about that?
Well, there's certain things I do like about it, and then there's certain things that I don't. And I don't want to, go down those gravel roads. But I love a good lyric. I really, really respond to a good lyric. So I do appreciate what they're doing today. I fall right in the middle of it, kind of like in that 90s, 2000 kind of era with that good country stuff. That's kind of where I fall. But I've learned to love the Merle Haggards and the Johnny Cash songs, and the old guys just really paved the way for us. Yeah. And I love to pay tribute to them, for sure.
All right, Brian Scott, he's back in town. Yay. Tonight at Runway with Siobhan Velarde. So Much BS. Shows at 7:30. Check out Eventbrite. Don't miss them. So glad you're back in town. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And can I do one more plug?
Real quick.
Real quick, we're doing a Haunted Hangar at the Runway on October 30th.
Yes.
So get your tickets now at Runway at ccbc.com.
Okay, you got it. All right, Brian Scott, thank you. We'll be back with more on the Desert Scene.
The Desert Scene on Radio 111. Cultural events and the people who make it happen in the desert cities with Bonnie G and Brayan Mendoza.
And we're back on the Desert Scene. Real quick, another reminder tonight. Again, So Much BS, Brian Scott, Siobhan Velarde at Runway. Also tonight, Frankie's Italian Bakery in the back room. The songs of the legends, Frankie Mamoni, Christy King, Joel Baker, Kitty Murray, Tommy Dodson. Check that out. That is tonight at Frankie's show, dinner and show at 6 p.m. Okay.
Oh, so there's been this viral video, and Bonnie I showed Bonnie a little bit of it, but there's been this viral video going around by Jamie Costa. Jamie Costa is an actor, I believe, who's made fan films of Star Wars. He put together test footage for, I think, a possible fan film about Robin Williams. And for those of you who don't know who Robin Williams is, I'm surprised.
I don't think there's anybody that doesn't know. Okay.
But he was the star of Mork and Mindy. He's won an Oscar for Good Will Hunting, Good Morning Vietnam. Yeah. And then like Mrs. Doubtfire, and he was the voice of the genie on Aladdin. So
huge career.
So this video.
So sad we lost him. Yeah.
So this video came out, and so since you're a vocal teacher, why don't you tell us a little bit of what you thought about it? Like,
I thought he was quite good. I think he definitely, there's a physical resemblance. I think he's really gotten his energy. Of course, Robin Williams, he's bouncing off the walls. His energy and his mannerisms and a lot of his vocal, I thought it was really good. The little bit I saw, I thought he did quite well.
I got to agree with that. So for those of you who may have missed it, but like Jamie Costa put together this test footage for a possible Robin Williams short film or fan film, I believe. And what it is, it's a depiction of Robin Williams on the day that John Belushi died. And so it has gotten a lot of love on social media because of how strongly he resembles the character. But it isn't just.
No, he's a good actor. He's a good actor. You can tell. I mean, the moment when he's told in this little snip that you see, the moment that he's told about John Belushi's death. I mean, he's a good actor. That was a very genuine reaction. I mean, I think his acting is quite good.
And it isn't like an impression, because I've seen Robin Williams impressions that don't really do it for me, but this was actual performance becoming Robin Williams. Yes. And the one impression I think of is like when he did the genie, he stopped doing the genie for Disney after a while because he was mad that they used his face as advertisement. So when he got the offer to do the sequel, he rejected it. He said no. And so Dan Castellaneta, who does the voice of Homer Simpson on The Simpsons, he did a couple of Robin Williams impressions for the TV show of Aladdin, and it just doesn't sound the same. And that's the only frame of reference I've ever had with a Robin Williams like impression.
Mm-hmm.
But to see this man, Jamie Costa, do it was just wonderful.
Yeah.
And Robin Williams' daughter has, however, suggested that fans do not send that video to her. She does not want to have that video sent to her. She's talked about how that was one of the most difficult days of her father's life.
Yeah, and she has a right to say that. I mean, it's one thing. It's one thing to be a famous person who's decided that they want that lifestyle to have people. But when you're the daughter or the family member of someone famous, and people are sending you stuff that's painful, that's not right.
No, definitely. Even if it's good intentions, I do want to urge people that if you see that video, don't send it to her.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, for pop culture history, today, well, actually the 14th, which was yesterday, Winnie the Pooh was first published by A.A. Milne.
And what year?
1926.
Really?
So
1926.
So about
almost 100 years ago.
95 years.
Wow.
95 years.
Wow.
And in 1957, the Everly Brothers' first hit, Bye Bye Love, was made it to the top of the charts.
Wow. Great song.
Great song. And, it was, at the time, it was controversial because it was a little bit more sexual than people were used to at the time. But, now it's so tame that it doesn't even matter. It's such a tame song. And another thing is the world was introduced to I Love Lucy in 1951 on October 15th, which is today.
Okay. Wow.
And so, of course, that's such a monumental show, and was the #1 show for 4 of its 6 years.
Yeah. I mean, that huge hit. Absolutely.
A seminal hit. I still think of it as one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. I still think of it as such.
Yeah, very funny. Very, very funny.
And October 16th in 1950, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is published. C.S. Lewis's famous first Narnia book was published, and it's still a popular, beloved fantasy series with an allegory for Christianity and all that. So, if you want to introduce your kids to some fantasy, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is actually really great. I still think it's great. Have you ever read it?
You know what? I have not. I was just thinking, I probably should sit down and read that one of these days.
It takes 2 hours, honestly, because of how short it is. Because it's a children's book, so it's only 2 hours. And then, finally, the last piece of pop culture news I'm going to give is that in October 17th, which is coming up, in 1956, Around the World in 80 Days premiered in theaters and went on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. I don't think it's a great movie, but I think it's a fun movie and features one of my favorite actors, Cantinflas.
Real quick. Oh, no, we don't really have time. I was going to ask you about theater. Well, just save it for next week. Movie theaters and where they are as far as masks, no masks, numbers of people, blah, 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 blah.
We'll save that for next week.
Yeah, we'll save that for next week. Thank you so much to our guests, to Ron Celona, Jeanette Knight, and the fabulous Brian Scott. We're so glad the theater's opening up. It's fall. Things are happening again. But you still want to be smart and stay safe out there. All right. See you next week.